Hello and welcome to America Can We Talk? I'm Debbie Georgatos. Today, we're going to talk about deep state jitters, Andrew Weissman. Congressman Louie Gohmert joins me in studio, and Trump does the Daytona 500. And I'll tell you why these stories matter to you. Stay tuned.
Debbie Georgatos, host of America Can We Talk, is an author, attorney, and political analyst whose mission is to inspire the American political conversation about preserving liberty in the best country on earth.
And welcome again to America Can We Talk, and to today's First Five. I'm Debbie Georgatos. Many of you likely recall we have had Sidney Powell on the show many times. She's the author of License to Lie. She's also the fabulous attorney representing Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. She is in the news a bit because she wrote a letter in June of last year to Attorney General Barr urging him to look into all of the what she was characterizing as wrongdoing, dishonesty inside the DOJ during the Mueller investigation and ultimately prosecution of Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. Well, I don't know if it was that letter or something else, but very recently, Attorney General Barr announced he is going to assign a separate prosecutor outside of the Mueller team, somebody outside of Washington of all things, to look over the entire handling of the prosecution by the Mueller team of Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. I think this is making leftists very nervous. The Mueller team and the name Weissman, we're going to get to him in a moment. The name Weissman is central to the First Five today because Weissman was out on national television on talk shows over the weekend saying that he doesn't really think that what Attorney General Barr is doing is trying to look into just the Flynn case. He thinks, and he's concerned, that Attorney General Barr is really trying to reopen all of the investigation of the work of the Mueller team, and specifically he mentioned Comey, Strzok, and not Page. Comey, Strzok, and a third person. I'll tell you in a moment. But the point of it is, I think that Andrew Weissman is extremely concerned that all of this, behind the scenes, hidden prosecution, all that happened with the Mueller team, and Weissman is the one, by the way, who is described by Sidney Powell in her book, in great detail in her book, License to Lie, as a really bad actor inside the Department of Justice. And in the Mueller investigation was described as the pit bull who really was in charge of the entire Mueller prosecution investigation looking into the alleged non-existent Trump-Russia collusion. I think Weissman's worried. He does not like the idea that someone with fresh eyes outside of his control might be looking into all of what this Mueller team did. That, my friends, is today's First Five. Now I want to turn and welcome our guest in the studio, Congressman Louie Gohmert. Welcome, sir.
Always good to be with you, Debbie. Thank you.
I'm so glad you're here. And I will tell our listeners, earlier today I went to a luncheon where he spoke to a lot of other political activists, and I was telling him before we went on air that I had one set of questions ready, and then I listened to him talk at lunch, and now I have other questions, and so we're going to talk in hyperspeed. But let me just start with, first of all...
Well, you may talk at hyperspeed. I'm doing the best I can.
Okay. Yes, I grew up in upstate New York,
right.
So we get it out quickly. But to just be sure you all know, Congressman Louie Gohmert is a hero among conservative circles. He represents a CD, is kind of symbolic, Congressional District 1 from the great state of Texas in Congress, been in Congress since 2005. He is truly a hero of the conservatives. He is, among many reasons, because he's outspoken, he speaks his mind, he pursues what he thinks is true. By way of very quick background, he is an attorney. He served as a state court judge. He served in the military in the JAG Corps. Is that right?
Yeah.
JAG
I was
Corps?
originally commissioned infantry, and then I was urged to go get a graduate degree before I started my 4-year obligation. So I thought, well, okay, I'll go to law school. They encouraged that. I didn't know if I'd be infantry or JAG when I finished, and I was brought on active duty. But then I got my orders to JAG and to the home of the infantry at Fort Benning, Georgia. So that's where I spent nearly 4 years. Yeah.
I love that. So, and he's also been a judge. I mentioned both in state court and an appellate court judge in Texas. And I'm laying all that out because I want to probe a lot about the Mueller team today, the investigation, and really get at someone who is an experienced person in Congress and knowledge of the law and as a judge. And I'm going to start with our buddy, Roger Stone. Okay, he's not my personal friend or anything.
No, I understand.
But Let me just ask you this. Do you think the reaction of the Department of Justice and the media, the reaction that this was such an egregious thing for Attorney General Barr to have a second sentencing recommendation submitted in the Stone case, did the DOJ and the media overreact, or was Attorney General Barr way out of line?
I would say they did not overreact if they had felt as strongly about Brennan being sentenced to a long prison sentence, Clapper being sentenced to a long prison sentence, McCabe being sentenced to a long prison sentence, Comey being sentenced to a long prison sentence, because all of them have lied under oath. It certainly appears that way because they said one thing under oath and it turned out they knew better and it wasn't true. So anyway, you can characterize it as lack of candor, which is what the Mueller, Comey, McCabe, Weissman group likes to describe if it's one of their friends, one of their Trump haters. But if it turns out it was inaccurate, like in Flynn's case, well, he's a lying scumbag and he needs to go to prison. It is really outrageous the way they've turned justice upside down.
Okay, my read on it also, and with respect to Roger Stone, my understanding was Attorney General Barr actually had the conversation and thought that what the prosecuting attorneys were going to submit as a sentencing recommendation was leave it up to the judge. And then, unbeknownst to him...
And that wasn't his idea. That was the people under him, what they had thought and what they had proposed.
And they all agreed to it, though.
Yeah, they all agreed to it. And then when it got to the lick log, the attorneys at the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office ended up pushing for the max, 7 to 9 years. And so that's why Barr got pushed from the people who had supplied the suggestion, the recommendation, let's don't push for prison time, let's leave it up to the court. They were shocked that Jesse Liu's old alumni would end up going for the jugular. Roger Stone is not a threat to America. Weissman, McCabe, Comey, Mueller, these guys abusing power, that's a threat to America and our way of life, and it continues to be. But Roger Stone, are you kidding me? It just ridiculous the way they've gone after him.
I agree, ridiculous the way they've gone after him. And by the way, your answer reminded me the three people that Weissman was trying to say Barr is really secretly reinvestigating. It was McCabe, Comey, and Strzok. He's saying when Barr made this announcement that he's going to have someone truly neutral look back into the case of Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, what they're really doing is looking into those three characters, all who are, Weissman allies, all on the anti-Trump team. First,
I wish they'd throw Christopher Wray in there also, my personal thought, because I didn't know Christopher Wray. I hadn't done my homework when he got appointed. Apparently, the White House hadn't done sufficient homework when they recommended him to the president. But I was hoping he would come in and clean up the mess, punish the people that had done wrong, so that the FBI could get their reputation back as being the best law enforcement agency in the world. But he comes in, and it's just my impression, but my impression is that he has done more to cover up and to just try to sweep things under the rug. And a good indication is, and we had him before our committee within the last 2 weeks, I'm asking him about Kleinsmith. And I've had concerns, Debbie, that Kleinsmith, since they caught him red-handed, taking information that Carter Page had worked for our intelligence agency and adding the word not, that he had not worked for, and submitting that to the court. It's a fraud on the court, it's perjury, all this kind of thing. I was afraid they would make Kleinsmith the lone scapegoat. That was my concern, but now we're seeing Christopher Wray lets him resign so he can go get a better paying job in the civilian sector somewhere, I'm sure. But but lets him resign. This is a guy that committed fraud on the court so he could spy on a campaign. This is a guy that needs to go to jail. And my concern was, if Kleinsmith is the only one that goes to jail, then our justice system is still broken. Nobody's learned a lesson. They learned a lesson, don't be the fall guy, but it's okay to go after your political enemies. So Christopher Wray needs to be in there as well.
I agree. And Christopher Wray, after the Inspector General report came out, his comment was something like, trying to falsely convey humility. Well, I see we have some problems, so we'll do retraining. I think his words are retraining. We'll adjust our guidelines.
Yeah. He'd fit in real good in China. They do a lot of that retraining in China. So, yeah, he would do well over there.
But it was a failure to acknowledge it wasn't people filled out the wrong form or didn't sign the form. It was intentional wrongdoing, and his reaction is just ignoring that.
Exactly, and that is the big problem. If people are not punished, and this is what I commented to Christopher Wray, I said, I know you believe in deterrence or you would not be in law enforcement, but when you have this many people lie and change the facts or misrepresent the facts to come after a presidential campaign, to come after American citizens, to violate their civil rights, and you don't do anything but maybe the most culpable, that the evidence is most clear on, you let him resign, there is no deterrence. This will keep going. And Debbie, I'm really afraid if Trump doesn't get reelected, or if he gets reelected and these same kind of yahoos are running things, we're not getting the country back. They will continue to investigate political enemies the way Brennan Clapper and all these people have, Sally Yates. And I don't think we can get the country back.
I share that concern, and in part it means we have to get back Republican control of the House so we can stop having endless impeachment investigations, and even hopefully a stronger majority in the Senate, because President Trump needs to be replacing Christopher Wray as an example. He needs new leaders, new house cleaners, and he can't get that if he has a very wobbly, bare majority in the Senate.
And I'm frankly tired of Christians telling me, Louie, we don't have to worry. We know God's in control. And I've never met Tommy Nelson, a pastor up in Denton, but I listened to a 12-hour Bible study, and toward the end, he said, yeah, we know God's sovereign. We know he's in control. And these are his words. Just because God is in control doesn't mean he wants us to lean on our shovel and pray for a hole.
That's a great line. I'm going to use that line.
And so God has given us, for those that believe in God, and you and I do, God's given us tools. And he expects us to use them, not just lean on them and ask God to do what we need to do or could do ourselves. He gave us a tool, get after it.
That God gave us America. This whole idea of the America and the justice system, and the notion that you have to hold people accountable. If you don't have rule of law, you're just abandoning the country to anarchy or to the toughest.
And Debbie, it's not the country. I mean, I've talked to people all over the world and traveling all these countries. And yes, Western Europe, they get a little put out with what they consider to be American conceit. But I'm talking about people in small countries, island countries, including Australia, Eastern Europe. The Eastern Europeans are more that have come to them. They're more concerned right now than most Americans are. But what they say over and over, if you guys lose your freedom in America, all of us have no chance of living in freedom. Their countries are gone. They can't hold back, whether it's China, Russia, Iran, Turkey, whoever it is. They can't hold them back without us being strong.
Couldn't agree more. And I'm going to tie that losing our freedom concept to holding on to the rule of law, because one reason we have freedom in America
is the rule of law.
The rule of law. We agree with ourselves. Declaration setting out the idea we have rights from God because we were born. Constitution, structure, all of that creates freedom. If we don't honor it, if we don't enforce it, if we don't insist on it, we lose it. And so I think that people, because it kind of ties on the next thing I want to ask you about Attorney General Barr. I'm very glad he's there, and I'm very glad he's fighting. I get a little concerned. I did during the impeachment, because Attorney General Barr and U.S. Attorney Durham are looking into the predicate and the beginning of.
At least we keep hearing that.
Yes, the beginning of the Trump-Russia
But what was the
collusion
U.S.
hoax.
attorney we'd heard before that from Utah that was supposed to be looking into it?
Dropped the
didn't-
ball.
Nothing.
Did nothing. So my question is, I feel concerned sometimes. I saw that the Democrats, they would take out President Trump for wearing socks that don't match if they could. And so you have the Democrats out to get
Well,
him.
come on now. That is an abuse of power when you wear the wrong socks.
And you offend people's sensibility.
Yeah.
But I do feel concerned because I think
I need to talk. There may be some liberals listening. What my comment about the socks, that's called sarcasm. And I just wanted them to know,
Thank
because they
goodness
don't
you clarified
recognize
that.
sarcasm.
Yeah. But on a serious note, you watch the Democrats, they do want to destroy President Trump, and I keep hoping I would like some signal from the Department of Justice, Attorney General or U.S. Attorney Durham, something, because all the time that Republicans are pointing out this was a coup attempt, this was an attempt to take down the president, and you hear from them, we're investigating, we're doing a thorough investigation. It's like they're letting President Trump, dangle in the wind too long or get pummeled.
Yeah.
Are you concerned about that?
Yes, I have been. That this is taking too long. Durham should have come back with something a year ago, last summer, something. But my concern is he's going to pull a Mueller and wait until after the election when more people have been confused or misled as to what the real facts are. So that's a huge concern.
Oh, I am deeply.
And let me on the issue of our freedom. I've read a lot of Dostoevsky, and I didn't see this quote, but Whittaker Chambers, I know he did a lot of defense of Christianity, and he was big on the Russian Orthodox Church. But Whittaker Chambers quoted him as saying, the problem with socialism is not economic. The problem with socialism is atheism. Mm-hmm. And if you get to the heart of it, if you have a true socialistic country, then you're going to have to do what the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics did, and that is, God is the government. And I'll never forget this was while the Soviet Union still existed, going out to the only recognized seminary in the Soviet Union was out good ways from Moscow, called Zagorsk, and it was a walled small community. They accepted about 40 a year into their program. Thousands applied to be the priest for the Russian Orthodox Church. But as you turn in, there was a building there that had a big painting of Lenin's face, and then in Russian it said, "Lenin is with us." You may be turning into this so-called Christian enclave,
at a seminary.
But never forget, it's Lenin who is with us. So that's the way it is, and that's where we're headed. And we've already seen from Bernie Sanders and Senator Feinstein going after two different people for being Christians and
Supreme
believing.
Court Justice nominees. Yeah.
Well, Bernie went after Russ Vought, who is head of the Office Management Budget. Feinstein went after the person that I hope will be the next Supreme Court appointment, but certainly if it's not Donald Trump in office, it won't be. Yeah.
Yeah.
But both of them, they were grilled and belittled and mocked basically because they believed what Jesus said, "I'm the way, the truth, the life. Nobody goes to the Father but by me." And then the judge even had the nerve to go to a weekly Bible study. So that's why Feinstein felt the dogma was so deep with her. But the dogma was really on the side of Feinstein and Bernie Sanders. But it's becoming dangerous even now.
I agree that it is. As a funny aside, I went to Soviet Union also, and it was still communist. Mm-hmm. And my one impression I remember, it was so gray. I mean, women wore
everything
dark
felt gray, yes,
and somber, and the women you see in the street walking down the street, there was no one smiling. It was just a dark plotting. And you know, I don't know if you're in Moscow, you probably heard this too, but they had those loudspeakers blasting in Russian. And we asked this was in senior year of high school. I asked our tour guide, what are they saying? Because it wasn't music, it was talking. He said, communist propaganda. 24/7. And did you also happen to hear that?
Absolutely. And Pravda was nothing but propaganda. There might be a shred of truth here or there, but basically it was lies. And art went out the window. You know, you couldn't choose what you wanted to paint or make if you were an artist. And same if you're a journalist or if you're a poet. It all had to glorify the Soviet Union. And I got to know some Soviets, college students, and they were saying the first lesson they were ever taught in school was about this young kid. I think he was 6 years old, and all the farmers were told to bring in all of their wheat into the common storehouse, and his parents saved a little bit back for their family. And they'd been encouraged, you know, anybody you see, you owe it to your country to report. He reported his parents. His parents were arrested and jailed. The other farmers stoned the little boy to death. And so it was considered the highest and best thing you could ever do in your life is to be a martyr like this young man, turning others in. And then going to a daycare, they immediately tell us first thing, now parents are simply temporary custodians, but very temporary, because we're constantly monitoring, and if any parent tells their child anything that we think is negative for the country, then we immediately take those children away and put them in the hands of a better caregiver. And I thought at the time, thank God, literally thank God I'm from America, and this just doesn't happen. And now in recent years you start hearing more and more bureaucrats saying, we're the ones responsible for those kids, not the parents. We're the ones, and you know, we need to move them out. We need to do this and that.
It was one of the scenes in 1984. The little boy turned his dad in for talking in his sleep, saying things in his sleep that were inconsistent with the rules at the time, and that was it. Yeah.
Well, I'm often misquoted, but a quote that actually I was accurately quoted was, "The only thing Orwell got wrong was the year."
Oh yeah.
Wasn't 1984, but the rest of that stuff.
Oh, very alarming. And, you know, it's a really funny thing, too, because I mentioned this to another guest last week. It feels like we live in a parallel universe when we're back to Washington, because you have, for example, when the Senate impeachment trial was occurring, and so you have, you know, the House has voted for impeachment, you're over there in the Senate. Everyone, I've had many guests on my show, and pundits I read, experts I read, consistently recognize the entire Trump-Russia collusion was cooked up out of whole cloth to attack the president.
Nothing.
But yet
nothing there.
Yeah. But then you're back into the Senate impeachment trial, where you have the House managers, including Adam Schiff, still making reference to it, still saying, well, you know, the Mueller thing. And it's kind of like I don't know if he believes it or he doesn't, but
he's a smart guy. He knows better.
So what he's really saying is, he thinks he can keep duping the American people, that they will hear him say it and they'll keep rejecting what you've been saying, what many conservatives are saying. The whole thing was cooked up. And it's just, I mean, how long can this parallel track on Washington? This is, I get back to why we need to have Attorney General Barr to come up with something, findings.
And actually, people that have lied to Congress, who are part of the FBI, part of the DOJ, part of the Intel, if they're not punished, I don't think we get this little experiment in self-government perpetuated for much longer. I think we're pretty well done.
Well, that was one of the things I wanted to ask you about, and I have certainly gone on my own show about this, but what if we just say, Republicans say, okay, you know, the president was not removed, we had the impeachment, but he wasn't removed, and digging up all of this intrigue with inside the Department of Justice and finding all the wrongdoers. And there are people concerned, this is what Barr thinks, you really may end up with America in such deep distrust of the DOJ. You'll have so much damage to America. Maybe we're better just put it all behind us and move forward and stop investigating it. I'm not advocating this. I'm asking you, how does that hurt America?
Because the forces that have used justice system, intel, to try to take to prevent a guy from getting elected president and then to take him down, take down his friends, because I really think, from what I perceived, these people thought if they came whole hog after Trump, after people that worked for him, after his family, after business associates, that within 6 months, you go back and look at some of the things there, we think he'll resign within. They thought this guy was going to say, you know what? To heck with all of you, I'm going back and make more money. But they didn't know Donald Trump. And that is not what he shocked them over and over. He's gone in there and fighting for what's right. And as a Christian, I have some people say time to time, like after I was grilling Peter Strzok, the man sat there and lied to me.
Yes.
And he had previously said, I never lie, I always tell the truth. Sat there and lied, and there's been no consequences for lying under oath. But people thought I broke the rules when actually there's nothing against going after somebody who says they don't lie and point out that they have lied, they do lie.
Yep.
But he's amazing. He really is. I mentioned earlier, though, I thought he was somebody that was so good keeping that smirk on his face and not changing expressions that he could probably pass a lie detector. But I understand
while lying.
That he's flunked a couple of those, I've heard. But anyway, it helps if you got good friends in the FBI that'll pull stuff like that out for you.
That does help a lot, yeah. You know, I love that you and many others talk about the importance of getting to, rooting out to use Attorney General Barr's term, and the predicate, the beginning, how this all got started, every player involved, because it really does tie back to actually holding on to America. And I think that sometimes people think it's a melodramatic or it's hyperbole.
Yeah, why are you? But you're a Christian. You ought to be more forgiving and loving and
it's
caring.
Just one little
And
blip.
Jesus said, "Love your enemies and turn the other cheek," and that is all true. And that's the way we should live individually. But when you're in a government role, and I would humbly submit that if you're an American citizen, you get calls for jury duty. You can support people for government positions. You can run yourself. This is a self-government thing. When you're in that government role, when I was a judge, you don't turn the other cheek. You don't look the other way. You can love. When I was a judge, I could love the person I was sentencing, but there had to be consequences, like Romans 13 talks about. If you do evil, you need to be afraid. And that was the role of the government. So people that are Christians should not confuse just turning and looking the other way when their responsibility is in the role of a voter, office holder, supporter.
Juror.
You have an obligation to, in that role, to make sure you interview people and look at their resumes before you vote for them, and then you help hold them accountable. That is critical stuff if we're going to keep this thing.
Couldn't agree more. Turning to President Trump, he is in the White House. He is cleaning things out. You've had whatever the number.
He's trying.
Currently is trying to clean up people who really just aren't willing to support his agenda, the National Security Council, but he's still, around him in the White House, he still has people
He's
who
got
are
some people need to go.
Obama holdovers who are not just not excited about his presidency, they're working against him.
Exactly, and he's had some people do the hiring that specifically would hire people who were not for him and didn't want to see his agenda. And actually, George W. Bush experienced that as well.
Yeah.
And, we can agree and disagree about things, but George W. Bush, to the heart of him, he's a very gracious guy. And Donald Trump, unless you're jacking him around, he's very gracious and generous. But George W. Bush, after the fiasco and Al Gore sued, like Richard Nixon refused in '60 when he got cheated, but Al Gore decides, let's go ahead and rip the country up and go to court. And so after all of that, the Supreme Court comes down, and Bush actually did win. But Bush is trying to be gracious. And in effect, his attitude appeared to be, okay, look, no matter what you've done in the past, everybody starts fresh from here. Some of them had just committed petty crimes like ripping the W's off of the keyboard, but some had committed serious crimes, leaking. Another factor. Did you know that the Obama administration prosecuted more people for leaking than all the other administrations put together?
No.
But George Bush, how do you think he kept secrets, man? They were aggressive in going after people. And that's, of course, when they went after the AP. They went after a Fox News reporter. I mean, they were violating civil rights illegally, and people should have taken that as a clue, probably doing it to some of your rivals.
Okay, so President Trump, he's sitting in the White House. He has his immediate family members he trusts who are working with him. But beyond that, I mean, this was a problem with an outsider. He doesn't have leagues of people he's worked with for years as a House member and a senator. So he's struggling to get that, to get trustworthy people who are on his agenda, or at least willing to support his agenda. And he's being stymied every step of the way, leaking and undermining. So, this is an impossible question. How does he fix that? Does he need to get a new person to hire to be the hirer?
Absolutely.
Okay, who should that be?
Well, there's a number of possibilities. Personally, I think the best person that he could get as his immediate protection from people that were the wrong people would be to have Mark Meadows as his chief of staff. He had thought about that December of 2018, and Mick Mulvaney's a good guy. But anyway, there'll be a change before long, and I know there's some deep staters that are really pushing to be in there, but he needs somebody like Mark frankly, he doesn't need somebody like Mark. He needs Mark, who knows where the bodies are buried, who can be trusted and who can't. He's got to have that kind of protection. But now, the chief of staff doesn't actually do the hiring. That's the president's personnel office, PPO. And there was a guy that was there, and I don't think he was doing good for the president, the people he hired, because there were a lot of people that he hired that were not good. He's gone. His subordinate is now head up, and he's a problem too, in my humble opinion. And so there needs to be a cleaning of house. One of the things Trump did in his graciousness when he came in, and he would choose somebody that seemed to have great credentials for one of the cabinet positions, and normally they would say, do you mind if I hire all the people that I'll be working with? Well, there are a lot of career people already there. One thing some people missed was once the Obama administration realized Hillary didn't really win,
She's
and
actually
Trump
not going
really
to be.
is going to be taking office in January, was told that they were moved into high gear, there are 3,000 to 4,000 people or so that are appointed in appointed positions that can be let go for any reason, no reason. They were moving as many of those as they could into the career positions. And if you remember, our friend Jeff Sessions, and he is a friend, but Jeff was saying, well, I listened to the career people who were telling me I should recuse myself. Well, that would have been fine in Alabama, but career people in the Justice Department loved Obama, loved Sally Yates, loved Brendan Clapper, and they should not have been listened to by Jeff Sessions.
I need to reiterate the one thing you just said. So you're saying that when Obama realized that Hillary was not going to be president,
they started moving people in career positions.
From career positions, from appointed positions into career jobs, because it makes it harder to fire them.
Yeah.
Because it makes it impossible.
Extremely difficult to fire them. And I'm sure you remember back, there was an incident, I think it was Arizona VA, where they had two calendars. One that was the rear calendar that people would wait for many, many months. And then she created a false one that showed everybody's being seen within 30 days. Well, it's a crime to do what she did. She was convicted of that, and she was fired for that, and she went to court and won. The judge saying, no, you can't just fire somebody for committing a crime. And so Congress stepped in when we had the majority and said, okay, you can fire people in the VA for cause, and especially they committed a crime. But we haven't done that for all the other places, including the White House. So that's been one of the frustrations I know the president has had. These people, I can't fire them. And you will recall, because you got such a good memory, he used to be quite good at saying, "You're fired." And then he gets to the presidency and finds out, I can't say that, not like I used to. But like the NSC, Robert O'Brien was hired. That's a great example. Yeah. And I like him, and I think he's doing everything he can to help. But the NSC was just too massive. Mm-hmm. There were way too many people that had access to the phone calls, access to the transcript, all this information, who hated Trump. Yep. And so he gets Robert O'Brien down there, and my understanding was his job was to get the NSC down to a size that was more manageable. You can't have hundreds of people with that as part of the NSC. And so he has cut 70, 80 people or so, and nothing personal. We just need to get the number down to where it's manageable. So I think that's a great step. Get the numbers down, people that will be manageable instead of having all these unaccountable people.
You know, another whole topic we have no time for today, but I've often advocated for the idea that we need to radically change in the federal government the power of the government to terminate employees. We shouldn't have a kind of a right to a lifetime job unless I kill someone in office standard. We need to have more flexibility, as you do in the private sector. But it's a topic for another day. We're almost out of time. Matt the Wonderful is going to give me a signal here in a minute. So I want to talk about Daytona, which was fun, but also on the Democrat side, watching this lineup of people, do you have any sense, do you think that the Democrats would really let the Bernie Sanders campaign win the nomination? I used to think they would do anything to stop him, and do you think there's anything to the idea that maybe Bloomberg is eyeing a Bloomberg-Hillary Clinton ticket?
Well, he has said he is. Bloomberg said he would consider Hillary
Clinton. I thought
Clinton.
He backpedaled right after that.
Well, I think he probably should have.
Yeah.
And somebody was saying at lunch today, privately, they're saying, if I were a presidential nominee picking my vice president, I look at all of the people that have died. And I'm not sure that I would want to have Hillary. All she is one heartbeat away from being president, and I'm that one heartbeat. I'm not sure that's who I would want.
Very good point.
Regardless of the reason for all the deaths, there are a lot of people that confronted the Clintons that are
no longer with us.
They're maintaining room temperature now. So,
gosh.
Yeah, so
what do you think the Dems are going to let Bernie Sanders win this? Do you think they'll try to interfere
they've got
behind?
away with it once, cheating to keep him out of getting the nomination. But I just keep coming back to this. Would you want a socialist for your party's? I mean, as some of the black officials have said, there are a lot of African Americans that are not comfortable with some of the things being proposed they go to church. These are wonderful people, they're just not comfortable with some of these things. And that's why I brought up what I did about socialism. The problem with socialism is atheism, and you've got an awful lot of minorities, Hispanics, African Americans, a lot of minorities who are brothers and sisters in Christ
believers.
with us. And they don't buy some of this socialistic nonsense.
Could not agree more. I'm going to ask Matt the Wonderful if I sent one little clip. This is from a tweet, but it is President Trump at NASCAR. We'll quick play his little clip. Yeah, here we go.
NASCAR fans, to welcome back your United States Air Force Thunderbirds and to deliver the most famous words in motorsports at the Daytona 500. Please welcome this year's Grand Marshal, the 45th President of the United States of America, Donald J. Trump, accompanied by First Lady of the United States, Melania Trump.
Daytona International Speedway, we love our country, and it's truly an honor to be with all of you at the great American race. Gentlemen, start your engines.
When the Jets come over right at that time.
Okay.
That's fantastic.
It is. So that's good. I'll close out with this. Do you not just love Donald Trump, the president, showing up at the Daytona 500. I mean, is he just, was that a stellar or what?
You know, the guy's a billionaire. I loved it. He's just, people don't really, he's just good folks. I realized that at Mar-a-Lago when I'm having lunch, and the only thing that looked like it was not too expensive was Mary Trump's meatloaf. And it had mushroom sauce, and I always ate it with ketchup, but this is a fancy place, so I didn't ask for ketchup. And when he came up, sat down, he goes, "Wow, Louie, that looks good." And he said, "I hadn't used my salad fork," and he scrapes off about 1.5 inches of my meatloaf on his plate. And he tasted, "That is good. I haven't." I said, "Well, it should be. It's your mother's recipe." And so he said, "Bring me some of that." And so I was careful. It's a nice place. I didn't ask for ketchup, didn't ask for salt and pepper. They bring in his meatloaf, and then she comes back with a big bottle of ketchup, and he's sitting there pumping ketchup all over his meatloaf with the mushroom gravy and all over his mashed potatoes. And I thought, he may have billions of dollars, but he's my kind of guy.
And on that note, I love it. I thought that was a brilliant thing for President Trump to show up at Daytona 500. Oh my gosh. Yeah, people loved it. Folks, we are sadly, as often happens, we are simply out of time. So I'm going to turn to, I always do at the end of every show, to tell you why the stories we talked about today matter to you. To start with, we talked about the deep state jitters, and I'm telling you, Andrew Weissman is jittery. The Stone sentencing kerfuffle is a deep state head fake. Don't fall for it. The immediately ready, and I didn't even get to this. I think the whole opposition was pre-prepared, but the immediately ready Washington Post published letter signed by 1,100 former DOJ officials demanding Barr's resignation gives away the game. Mueller DOJ team wanted 7 to 9 years to stick it to Stone, despite the way he was arrested, as we all talked about. Barr said no, leaving to the judge to decide without a DOJ recommendation. Mueller DOJ team defied Barr and went ahead with the 7 to 9 years. Barr moved to correct and conform to his decision. Mueller DOJ team went to work with preset PR campaign, public letter to claim Trump ordered Barr to reduce the DOJ approved recommendation, and Barr obeyed. Therefore, Barr must resign. This is the argument of the left. I want you to have these facts so when your friends tell you that something really bad happened, this is what really happened. The American people are on to the deep state lies and tactics. Barr-Durham investigation is making leftists very nervous. And again, on Weissman, he appears on Meet the Press on February 16th, intimates that Barr is using independent review of Flynn case as a cover for a new investigation into Comey, McCabe, and Strzok. I hope he is. That Weissman sending SOS to the Democrats, the mainstream media and Pravda. That's why he's saying this. He's worried. The Michael Flynn case reeks of government misconduct, and the case is at the center and origin of the entire Russia collusion hoax and deep state coup plotting. Attorney Sidney Powell has publicly and in court been calling out government misconduct in the Flynn case, and so informed the Attorney General Barr by private letter. Actually, I think it was in June. That's why Barr has finally moved to conduct an independent review of Mueller team conduct in the Flynn case, and Andrew Weissman is worried about where this will lead. And on Daytona, Trump's connection with NASCAR Nation, Americans, is real. They are American-loving patriots. So is he. Trump is also a master at branding. The 747 flyover over the track, people loved it. Taking a lap in the Beast, we can talk about that.
That's great.
Go right ahead.
Another thing people ought to be encouraged about, and I've told the president this, one of the biggest problems for getting rid of deep state establishment, improper personnel is they've always kept their head low and they were hard to identify. You couldn't figure out. But because of Trump derangement syndrome, he makes them crazy, and they raise their heads and they start sending letters and saying things. Oh, there's another one. There's another. So now, 3 years later, we're pretty well figuring out who needs to go.
We got your names.
We got the names. So anyway.
I love that. Near perfect re-election theater. That's what this NASCAR was, re-election theater. Americans know it, love it. Trump is for America, Dems are against it, and it is that simple. And that, my friends, is America Can We Talk for today. Congressman Gohmert, thank you so much for coming in.
With you always.
So fun to have you. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Tune in every Monday through Thursday, 3 p.m. Central Time to America Can We Talk, where I always talk truth about America, because America matters. I'll talk to you next time.
America Can We Talk? Truth about America.
Can you